That's what she told me. And maybe I should have listened. But the words that slipped out before I could stop them still hang in the back of my mind. Not with you here. It didn't happen in some candlelit place, not in a scene meant for memory. It was a Tuesday afternoon, fluorescent lights buzzing above me, the faint smell of grease and metal in the air. The repair shop wasn't glamorous. Oil stains on the floor, radio playing a half-static country song, a half-drunk cup of coffee perched on my workbench. I had my sleeves rolled up, trying to look busy when really I was just staring at the half-disassembled carburetor in front of me. That's when she walked in. She wasn't what I expected. A woman in her 40s, mid-40s maybe, wearing a tailored black jacket over a simple blouse, her heels clicking against the concrete floor like she didn't belong here, yet somehow made the whole room feel smaller. Her hair was tied back, but loose strands brushed against her cheek when she glanced around, like she didn't have time to perfect every detail, or maybe she didn't care to. "Are you the one who's supposed to look at my car?" she asked, her voice steady, not sharp but edged with the kind of confidence people earn the hard way. I wiped my hands on the nearest rag, nodding. "Yeah, that'd be me. What's going on with it?" She hesitated, just a fraction, a pause I might have missed if I hadn't been staring at her too closely. Then she handed me the keys. "It keeps stalling. I'm not sure if it's the battery or something else. I just need it fixed by tomorrow." Her nails brushed my palm when I took the keys. It wasn't intentional, I know that. But it was enough to make me clear my throat and look away before I said something stupid. While I checked under the hood, I could feel her eyes on me. Not in a careless way, more like she was studying, measuring. I tried to break the silence with small talk, but it felt thin in the air between us. She answered briefly, clipped, like words cost her more than they cost me. "You don't talk much, do you?" I finally said. "I talk when it matters." She leaned against the car, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. "You'll regret wasting words." That's when it happened, the line that slipped from me without thought, almost a whisper. "Not with you here." Her lips pressed into something that wasn't quite a smile, but not disapproval either. Something in between. She didn't answer, just tilted her head slightly, like she was deciding what box to put me in. For the next half hour, we stayed in that uneasy rhythm, me working, her watching, the hum of the shop filling the silence. Once, when I dropped a wrench, she bent to pick it up before I could, and our hands touched again. A spark. Nothing more. But I felt it all the way up my arm. She didn't linger when I told her I'd call once I knew more. Just gave a polite nod, gathered her jacket around her shoulders, and walked out into the late afternoon sun. The echo of her heels followed me long after the door shut behind her. It should have ended there. A routine customer, another face in a line of people with car troubles. But I can't stop replaying the pause in her voice, the way she looked at me without looking away, the way my words slipped out like they'd been waiting for her all along. And the strangest thing? I'm not sure if I regret saying it, or if I regret that she didn't reply. She came back 2 days later. Not for the car. It was already fixed, but with a stack of papers in her arms and a phone pressed against her ear. She looked out of place again, too polished for the grease-stained shop. But this time, she wasn't in heels. She wore flats, a simple gray dress, and her jacket was folded over her arm. Somehow, she looked softer. I caught her eye as she hung up. She gave a tight smile, like it hurt to use the muscles. "I needed a quiet spot to make some calls," she explained. "Yours is quieter than most." I could have told her the truth. The shop was never really quiet. The air compressors wheezed, tools clanged, and the radio droned on about last night's game. But I nodded anyway, wiping grease off my hands. "You can use the office. No one will bother you there." She hesitated, papers shifting in her grip, before following me in. The office wasn't much, just a desk littered with receipts, a chair that wobbled if you leaned too far back, and a window smeared with fingerprints. She set the papers down carefully, as if even mess deserved respect. "Thank you," she said, softer this time. I stayed leaning against the doorframe, pretending to check a clipboard, but really, I was watching her. The way she rubbed the side of her temple before dialing again. How her shoulders seemed heavier than the jacket she carried. How her laugh, when it finally came, wasn't the confident, clipped sound I'd expected, but something more accidental, like it escaped her by mistake. And then there were her hands. Slim, precise, with nails painted a faint shade of rose. They trembled slightly when she shuffled through her papers. She covered it quickly, but not before I noticed. "You're busy," she said suddenly, catching me standing there. "I don't want to interrupt." "You're not," I replied too quickly. My voice caught, and I had to clear my throat. "Besides, it's quieter with you here." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but it wasn't comfortable either. Something in between, like the weight of words we weren't saying pressed down on the air. She picked up one of the papers, stared at it without really reading. Her lips parted, like she might speak, but then she folded it back into the stack. "You'll regret letting me take up your space," she said finally, echoing her own words from before. I don't know what made me say it, but I leaned against the desk, close enough to catch the faintest scent of her perfume. "Not with you here." This time, she didn't deflect. She looked at me, really looked, and for a moment her eyes weren't guarded. They were tired, vulnerable, almost human in a way that made my chest tighten. She broke the gaze first, gathering her things too quickly. "I should go," she murmured, though she didn't move right away. Her hand brushed the edge of the desk as she steadied herself. For a second, I thought she might say more, might let the weight of that silence tip over into something else. But instead, she pressed her lips together, nodded once, and walked out. And still, long after the door shut, the image of her hands trembling lingered with me. It was raining the third time we found ourselves in the same room. Not a gentle rain either, the kind that streaks the windows and hums through the gutters, filling every pause with its steady insistence. I was closing up the shop late when I noticed a familiar car parked just outside, windshield wipers frozen mid-swipe. She was in the office again, jacket draped over the chair, staring at her phone as if it had betrayed her. She looked up when I stepped in, caught between relief and hesitation. "Sorry," she said, voice low. "I didn't mean to stay so late. My ride canceled, and I didn't want to sit in the lobby of some diner waiting for another one." I shrugged, trying not to sound too eager. "You can wait here until it clears up. Safer than outside." She nodded but didn't thank me. Instead, she pushed her phone aside and folded her arms on the desk, leaning forward like the weight of the day was pressing down on her spine. That was the first time I noticed how tired she looked. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, something heavier. We sat in silence for a while. I pretended to organize receipts. She pretended not to notice me glancing at her reflection in the rain-blurred glass. Finally, she broke it. "Do you ever feel like you're running out of time?" The question hit me harder than I expected. For her, maybe it was about life, choices made or unmade. For me, it was about sitting 5 feet away from her and not knowing how long I could keep pretending it didn't matter. I swallowed. "Sometimes. More lately." She smiled, faintly, almost to herself. "I thought so." There was a softness in her voice I hadn't heard before, and I almost told her then, about the way her presence filled the empty corners of my day, about how she lingered in my mind long after she walked away. Instead, I said nothing, just shifted closer under the pretense of plugging in the desk lamp. Our shoulders brushed, barely, accidentally, but enough to make the air between us sharpen. Her breath caught. I heard it, saw her hand pause mid-motion on the desk, and for a second, I thought she might lean closer. That's when her phone lit up. A name on the screen, half hidden, but enough for me to catch it. "Daniel." She reached for it too quickly, fumbling the papers. "I need to take this," she muttered. But her voice was uneven, not the steady control I'd come to expect. She turned away, speaking low, clipped. I didn't catch the words, but I caught the edge in them, the practiced detachment. I gave her privacy, staring at the rain running down the window, trying to steady the pull inside me. By the time she hung up, the space between us felt heavier than before, like something had almost broken through but didn't. "I should get going," she said, gathering her things. I nodded, though my hands tightened on the receipts I wasn't even reading. She hesitated at the door, fingers brushing the frame as if she wanted to say something but thought better of it. And then she was gone, leaving me with the sound of the rain and the ghost of that almost touch still burning in my shoulder. The shop was nearly empty that night, just the faint buzz of the overhead light and the hum of the soda machine in the corner. She'd stopped by again. Not for the car, not for the office, just stopped by. No explanation, only a half smile when I asked if everything was all right. We ended up sitting across from each other at the old break table. 2 paper cups of coffee between us. Neither of us drank much. For a while, we talked about nothing. The weather, the cost of parts, the radio station that only played sad songs after 8. But the words kept trailing off. Our pauses grew longer than the sentences. I could feel her watching me when I looked away. When our eyes met, she held the gaze too long, as though daring me to name what had been building between us. Finally, she set her cup down. The sound of it against the table was sharper than it should have been. "What are we doing?" she asked quietly. I froze. My chest tightened like the air had thinned. She didn't look away. Her hands were clasped together on the table, knuckles white. She wasn't angry, not exactly. More afraid of an answer. Or maybe afraid of silence. I tried to laugh it off. "We're having coffee." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not unkind, but as if she saw right through the thinness of my words. "You know what I mean." I did. God, I did. But saying it out loud felt like stepping onto a road with no way back. I leaned back, rubbing my palms against my jeans, searching for words that didn't come. "I don't know," I admitted. "But it doesn't feel like nothing." The silence that followed was heavier than any conversation we'd ever had. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, she looked small, like the weight she carried had finally slipped through the cracks of her composure. She whispered, barely audible, "I shouldn't be here." And yet she didn't leave. She stayed seated, staring at the untouched coffee, at the faint steam curling upward and vanishing before it reached the ceiling. I wanted to reach across the table, to touch her hand just once, but I didn't. My restraint felt like a cage. She finally met my eyes again. The softness there startled me. A quiet sadness, maybe even regret, layered with something I couldn't name. "You'll regret this," she said again, her voice breaking in a way it hadn't before. Then, after a long, trembling pause, she added, "But I already do." I didn't see her for a week after that night at the table. No messages, no footsteps echoing into the shop, no sharp coffee cups set down like punctuation. I told myself it was better that way, simpler, safer, but the silence pressed down harder than her presence ever had. Then, one evening, she returned. Not dressed for work this time. She wore a simple sweater, no makeup, hair pulled back loosely. She looked unguarded, almost undone. She held something in her hand, a phone, clutched like it had burned her. "Do you mind if I sit?" she asked. I nodded, and she lowered herself into the chair across from me. Her movements were slower than usual, deliberate, like she had rehearsed this moment and still wasn't sure how to play it. She placed the phone face down on the table. "I got a voicemail today," she said. Her voice was steady, but the space between each word was fragile. From someone I thought I'd never hear again. I didn't move. My breath caught, but I stayed still. She pressed her fingertips against the phone like she was holding it in place. "My ex-husband. He." She stopped, exhaled, and tried again. "He left years ago, just walked out. Took everything I thought I knew with him. And today, he decided to remind me he still exists." The room felt too small for her words. The overhead light flickered once, as if even it couldn't hold steady. I didn't answer, she continued, her gaze fixed on the scratched surface of the table. But his voice, it was enough to undo me. She finally looked at me, and the sharp, composed woman I had first met wasn't there. In her place was someone raw, someone scarred, someone who had carried silence for so long it had become armor. "You remind me of him sometimes," she said softly. The words landed like a blow I hadn't braced for. I shifted back, unsure whether to feel insulted or pulled closer. But then she added, "Not the man who left. The man he was before. The one I loved." I couldn't speak. My throat closed around the truth I wanted to spill. How I wasn't him. How I didn't want to be a shadow of her past. But my heart hammered, because in some unspoken way, it explained everything. Her hesitation, her guarded stares, the pauses before every word. She turned the phone over, tapped the screen, and the voicemail icon blinked. For a second, I thought she might play it. Instead, she locked the screen again, slid the phone aside, and whispered, "I don't know if that makes this better or worse." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears exactly, but with something she refused to let fall. I reached for my coffee just to keep my hands busy, but I couldn't drink. My chest ached with the weight of her confession, the gravity of being compared to a ghost. The silence stretched again, and then she whispered the line that split me open, "I don't trust myself around you." She didn't come back the next day, or the one after. I almost convinced myself it was finished, that her words, "I don't trust myself around you," had been her way of drawing the line in permanent ink. But a few nights later, she was there again. Not at the shop this time. I found her sitting on the hood of her car in the far corner of the lot, a coffee cup in her hand, jacket folded beside her. The evening air was cool, the sky low and heavy, stars smothered by clouds. "You shouldn't sit on cars that way," I said, trying to make my voice light. "Bad for the suspension." She smiled faintly, but didn't look at me. "This one's already carried too much weight." I stood beside her, not close, not far, waiting for her to push me away. She didn't. For a long stretch, we just listened to the low hum of passing traffic, the occasional chirp of crickets. The world felt slowed, as if holding its breath. "I can't undo what I told you," she said finally. "And I can't promise I won't keep comparing you to someone I lost. That isn't fair to you." Her honesty cut sharper than silence ever could. "I don't need promises," I said, my voice low. "I just don't want this to feel like a mistake." She turned her head then, eyes finding mine. The strength she usually wore like armor was gone. What replaced it wasn't weakness, it was truth. "It doesn't." The words were simple, but they broke something open inside me. I shifted closer, enough that our arms brushed. She didn't move away. My hand rested on the edge of the hood, inches from hers. When her fingers trembled and then stilled beside mine, I let mine drift just enough that they touched. Light, tentative, but real. Her breath caught, the smallest sound, and then she exhaled slowly, as though she'd been holding it for years. We didn't kiss. We didn't confess. We just sat there, hands barely linked, sharing the silence that no longer felt empty. After a long while, she leaned her forehead against my shoulder. Not dramatic, not heavy, just a quiet surrender, as if to say, "I'm tired of holding myself together. Let me rest here for a moment." I stayed still, afraid any movement would break the fragile honesty between us. And in that hushed space, with the cool night pressing around us and the weight of everything we hadn't said hanging above, I realized we had crossed into something neither of us could pretend away anymore. No declarations, no fireworks. Just two people, finally too close to deny it. And it was enough. I'm telling this now from a distance I couldn't have imagined when it began. Back then, I was just a guy in a repair shop, wiping grease from my hands and saying things I probably shouldn't have. She was a woman walking in with a broken car, carrying a life I couldn't see yet, but could feel in every pause, every silence. And yet, here we are. Not in the way stories usually end, not with declarations or perfect timing, but in the way life actually gives itself, quietly, unevenly, with edges that never quite smooth out. What changed? I think, mostly me. I learned that longing isn't always about chasing. Sometimes it's about waiting, about making space for someone who doesn't know if they can stay. I learned that silence can be more intimate than words, that a hand brushing against yours can hold more weight than 1,000 promises. As for her, she never stopped carrying her past. She still flinches sometimes when her phone rings with an unfamiliar number. But she lets me see it now. The armor isn't so thick, the pause is not so sharp. She laughs more easily, though not always for me. And sometimes, late in the evening when we're both too tired to pretend, she'll lean into me the way she did that first night in the parking lot, like it's the most natural thing in the world. We never had a moment where one of us said, "This is love." We didn't need to. It grew in the spaces between us, in the decisions not to walk away, in the honesty we couldn't avoid no matter how much it scared us. If you're listening, maybe that's the part worth carrying. That connection isn't always loud, or obvious, or neatly written. Sometimes it's in the missed words, the trembling hands, The quiet surrender that says, I'll let you close, even if I'm afraid of what it means. I don't regret what I said that first day, not with you here, because it's still true, even now, especially now. And maybe you've felt something like this before. Maybe you've had that person who disarms you with silence more than speech, who makes you second-guess the rules you thought you lived by. If so, I'd like to hear it. Tell me, have you ever found yourself in a moment you couldn't explain, but couldn't walk away from either? Because that's where I found her. And somehow, that's where I found myself too.